Erik Menendez was born on November 27, 1970, in Blackwood, New Jersey. He was the younger of the two sons of Jose and Mary, also known as Kitty Menendez. In 1979, when Erik was 9 years old, he and his older brother Lyle started at Princeton Day School, which was a private school. And according to friends, Erik grew up worshiping Lyle. Erik often told his friends how much he admired his older brother. But Erik's friends couldn't understand why, because they thought that Lyle was a troublemaker. Erik worshiped Lyle probably because of the fact that their father was closed off and he was hard to approach. But his older brother Lyle was always there for him. And even though the brothers' friends would comment that Lyle and Erik were extremely close, they claimed that their personalities were very different. Lyle was described as aloof and witty, while Erik was described as sensitive and quiet. When the brothers were young, their father, Jose, was very strict and had rules for everything, like what they could eat, who they could spend time with, who they could talk to, and even what books they could read. That was a lot of pressure, meeting their father's demands at such a young age. And so both of the brothers reportedly developed stutters, had stomach pains, and even developed a habit of grinding their teeth. And many stated that both of the brothers had nasty tempers. As they grew older, the brothers were drawn to each other for companionship. At Princeton Day School, Erik, much like his brother, was considered an average to below average student. A few of the teachers even thought that Erik had learning problems. But Erik's father, Jose, would not listen to any of this from the teachers. The teachers also noticed that Erik's homework that he turned in was far better than the work that he completed in class. Teachers also noticed that both of the brothers were immature compared to their classmates. Outside of school, there were also signs that Erik and Lyle were headed for serious trouble. In 1982, when Erik was 12 years old and Lyle was 15, their cousin Diane Mullen stayed with the Menendez family for the summer. One night, all three of the cousins began to play and wrestle. Suddenly, without warning, Erik and Lyle began to undress Diane. And without saying a word, the brothers tied her up and stripped off her shirt. Diane screamed, and the brothers retreated from their attack. She said that the brothers had attacked her with no warning. And as suddenly as the attack begun, it ended. Erik grew up emulating his brother for a long time and lived in Erik's shadow, especially at Princeton Day School. It seemed that neither of them would fit in at the school. They were both considered mysterious loners. They laughed at their own private jokes, and Erik grew up more sad and withdrawn from other people outside of his brother Lyle. Lyle started school at Princeton, and Jose, Kitty, and Erik moved to California in 1986. Erik was 16 years old and a sophomore in high school. Erik enrolled at Calabasas High School. Now, away from his brother and away from the comparisons that were often made between him and his brother at Princeton Day School, Erik was able to find more of his own identity. Erik made friends with a group of boys who were loud and cocky. Kitty had been worried that Erik did not like girls for some time.
For somebody to be gay, or was it just that you didn't know what you were?
No, I didn't think I was wrong to think I was...
No, you didn't understand my question. Do you think it was wrong for people to be gay?
No.
So, what was it?
It was just that I was confused, and it was difficult for me. My mom made it seem like it was worse than...
And because Kitty believed that Erik liked boys, when they moved to Calabasas, Kitty gave Erik an order to find a girlfriend within 6 months. Erik found an older girl at Calabasas High, but their relationship was short-lived. It ended at a party. Erik and the girl argued, and Erik ends up locking the girl in a room. Erik would not let her leave. She screamed and she yelled, but he would not let her out. Finally, after some time, Erik let the girl go. But the girl had had enough of Erik. Later, she recalled that he was, quote, one of the oddest guys I've ever met, end quote. And then going on to say that, quote, he's very arrogant, very confident, but deep down, he's got a lot of issues and insecurities, end quote. Erik later met another girlfriend, and her name was Janice. And Kitty and Jose both really liked her. Kitty thought highly of Janice. But perhaps one of the most important relationships that Erik made at Calabasas High was with Craig Signorelli. Erik grew up playing tennis, and Craig was the captain of the tennis team, and Erik was the #1 ranked player on their high school team. So Craig and Erik ended up spending a great deal of time together, and they even went on to write a screenplay entitled Friends. The script was a 60-something page thriller about a son from a wealthy family who reads his parents' will and learns that he will inherit $157 million if his parents pass. So the son ends up taking their lives, and he gets the inherited money. Does this sound familiar? Let's get into the screenplay. Craig Signorelli tells his story and how it all started. He even went on to testify against Erik during the trial. Craig says that it all started when him and Erik would take these long drives out to Malibu, and they would stop on the hilltops overlooking the ocean and talk about how to commit the perfect crime. The screenplay is centered around an 18-year-old named Hamilton Cromwell, and Hamilton lives a very pampered life. The first scene opens with Hamilton reading the family's will, which bestows a fortune of $157 million on him. Hamilton smiles sadistically, the script states. The next scene opens with Hamilton posed outside of his parents' bedroom door. The door opens, exposing the luxurious suite, and Mr. and Mrs. Cromwell are lying in bed. Their faces are of questioning horror as Hamilton closes the door gently. Hamilton says, "Good evening, Mother. Good evening, Father." His voice is of attempted compassion, but hatred completely overwhelms him. The scene fades. Hamilton actually taking the life of his parents is left to the audience's imagination, but a later scene shows Hamilton at his typewriter writing a list of 5 people, and his mother and his father were at the top of the list. Next on Hamilton's list is his former girlfriend, and with her he uses a rope to end her life. Later, he kidnaps his friend and he tells him, "I am in the process of writing a masterpiece of a novel which challenges the complexity of human understanding. Let's call this a game of survival. I will frame either you or your friend Joe." His friend Mike looks up to him and says, "You're mad." When Hamilton is arrested, he quickly gives the police an ironclad alibi. And in the end, after all of his 5 victims have been discovered in the ice in his basement, Hamilton's friend turns on him and he actually takes Hamilton's life. But Hamilton passes with a smile on his face. Now, around this same time, in July 1988, when Erik was 18 years old, him and his brother Lyle began to break into homes in Calabasas. They burglarized the homes of their parents' friends, and they were surprised by the large amounts of cash and jewelry that they were able to steal. The brothers had found an easy source of money without having to go to their dad to ask him for anything. The amount of money and jewelry that Lyle and Erik stole was estimated to be more than $100,000, large enough to be classified as a felony offense called grand theft burglary. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's detective who investigated the burglaries received a break in the case after Erik was stopped for a driving violation in Calabasas, and stolen property was found in his trunk. Later, the detective discovered a safe from one home in another home that they had burglarized. It appears that Erik had developed a guilty conscience and returned a safe that they had stolen to the wrong home. Jose was furious about the burglaries, and he was even more furious that his sons had gotten caught. Jose did not want his sons to spend any time in jail, and he hired a well-respected criminal defense attorney called Sheriff Shaliff. Shaliff was able to work out an agreement with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office that he would absolve Lyle from any participation in the burglaries. But there was a caveat. Erik had to take full responsibility for all the crimes. This was Jose's idea. At the time, Erik was a juvenile and had no previous record, so the judge sentenced Erik to community service with the homeless, and both of the brothers had to undergo psychological counseling. Jose wrote a check for $11,000 to the victims to recover stolen items because the brothers had already disposed of the items and they could not return them. The burglaries were the talk of Calabasas. It seems that the neighbors of the Menendez family were uncomfortable knowing that Lyle and Erik were free and not the least bit remorseful. Jose blamed Erik's friends instead of Erik for the burglaries, just as he has always blamed others instead of his sons, and he never had his sons take any accountability. After this incident, Jose began to complain about living in Calabasas. He told people at his company that him and his family were now receiving harassing phone calls and that his tires had been slashed. No one really knows if this is true or not, but he told associates at his company that he felt as though he and his family would be safer living in Beverly Hills. So that's just what he did. Jose bought an over 9,000 square foot mansion in Beverly Hills for $4 million. Side note, this house on Elm Street just sold this year, 2024, for $17 million. After graduating from Beverly Hills High, Erik competed in a number of tennis tournaments during the summer. He initially played well and he won his first round matches. However, he lost in the second round each time. In August 1989, the same year that Erik graduated high school, Erik returned to Beverly Hills after being away on tennis tournaments. There, he waited to begin college at UCLA. Erik had also been accepted to UC Berkeley, but he chose to attend UCLA because he thought that they had a better tennis team. Kitty's psychiatrist had recommended Jerome Oziel to Erik and to Lyle when they were ordered to undergo psychological counseling for the Calabasas burglaries. Shortly after Erik started treatment with Oziel, he gave permission to Oziel to discuss the contents of his sessions with Jose and Kitty. Kitty's fears may have been brought on by something that she learned from Oziel. On July 19, 1989, Kitty went to her therapist and she told him that she feared that her sons were psychopaths and that Erik and Lyle lacked a conscience. Kitty's therapist made notes of the session, and they indicated that Kitty was concerned that her sons were, quote, narcissistic, lacked conscience, and exhibited signs that they were psychopaths, end quote. Almost exactly a month later, on August 20th of 1989, Erik and Lyle took the lives of their parents in their Beverly Hills home. Jose was only 45 years old, and Kitty was only 47 years old. There were 6 GS wounds to Jose and a whopping 10 GS wounds to Kitty. The brothers even went back at some point to their car to reload. Not my cup of tea.